The most powerful spiritual text in Jewish history was buried from the world for 15 centuries. Someone didn't want you to read it. Not hidden by accident. Not lost in a flood or swallowed by time. Hidden deliberately. Guarded. Passed from teacher to student in secret. Whispered across generations. Locked away from ordinary eyes, as if the knowledge inside it was too dangerous, too bright, too transforming for the masses to hold. And now you're sitting here, watching this, wondering why a book that old still matters to your life today. I'm going to tell you. My name is Rabbi Eliezer Margalit. I'm 76 years old. I have spent 53 years studying the texts of Jewish mysticism. And in all that time, not a single week has passed that I have not returned to the Zohar and found something I had never seen before. Something that reached into the exact wound I was carrying that week and pressed light into it. That is not a metaphor. That is what this book does. But before I teach you what the Zohar actually says, and why it matters to you right now, in your specific life, with your specific pain and your specific longing, I need you to do one thing. I need you to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel right now. Because what I'm about to share took me decades to understand, and I'm going to give it to you in the next hour. And you do not want to lose this video. And I want you to type 3 words in the comments below. Just 3 words. Type, "Open my eyes." That is your declaration for today. Not a prayer to me. Not a performance for anyone watching. A declaration to the one who placed this video in front of you at this exact moment of your life. Open my eyes. Type it now. I'll wait. Now let's begin. I want to ask you something honest, and I want you to sit with the question instead of rushing past it. Are you tired of feeling like you're moving through your life on the surface? Have you ever stood in a place of prayer, or sat in a moment of silence, and felt certain that something was supposed to happen? Some shift, some opening, some word from God, and it just didn't come. Do you carry around the quiet suspicion that there is more to this existence than what you've been taught? More to Scripture than what you've been shown? More to your own soul than what anyone has ever told you? If you felt even one tremor of recognition reading those questions, then this video is not a coincidence. It was never a coincidence. Let me paint you a picture of what suffering looks like in the modern world. Because I have sat across from enough people in enough decades to know exactly what it feels like. It feels like 3 in the morning and you can't sleep, and the thoughts won't stop cycling. It feels like the hollow space between who you present yourself to be and who you actually are when no one is watching. It feels like going to services, or sitting in a pew, or opening a scripture app on your phone, and feeling absolutely nothing. Dry, empty, like you're pressing your hand against a glass window, looking at something warm and bright on the other side, but unable to pass through. You read the words, you know the words, but the words are not reaching the place inside you that is broken. You go through the motions of spiritual life, and something in you whispers, there has to be more than this. That whisper is not doubt. That whisper is discernment. That whisper is your soul, which knows far more than your mind does, crying out for the deeper water. The Zohar is the deeper water. But to understand why, you need to understand how this book came to exist. And the story of its existence is one of the most extraordinary stories in the history of human spiritual seeking. Because the Zohar did not emerge from a comfortable study hall, it did not arise from a place of safety. The teaching at its heart was forged inside a cave, under a death sentence, by a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to discover. His name was Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. He lived in the 2nd century of the Common Era, in the land of Israel, under Roman occupation. And if you think the world feels oppressive today, I want you to understand what oppression meant in that era. The Romans were not merely inconvenient. They were executing Torah scholars. They had banned the study of the Jewish law under penalty of death. The 10 greatest sages of the generation, men whose learning illuminated the entire world, were rounded up and killed. Rabbi Shimon had studied under the great Rabbi Akiva. He had received from that master not only the revealed law but the hidden Torah, the inner teachings that most people never heard. And Rabbi Shimon was a man constitutionally incapable of keeping his mouth shut when he saw injustice. The Talmud records the incident that changed everything. Several sages were gathered, discussing the Roman occupation, and one of them praised the Romans for what they had built: markets, bridges, bathhouses. Rabbi Shimon said what he actually believed. He said everything they built for themselves, not for us, not for anyone but their own appetites and their own glory. Someone in the room reported those words to the Roman authorities. A death sentence was issued. Rabbi Shimon and his son Rabbi Eliezer fled. They found a cave. Tradition records in the area of Pekian in the northern Galilee. And they hid. The Talmud tells us, in Tractate Shabbat, that a carob tree and a spring of water miraculously appeared at the entrance of the cave to sustain them. 13 years. Stop right there. 13 years inside a cave. No community, no students, no marketplace conversations, no normalcy, nothing but the Torah, the divine presence, the silence of stone, and the company of his son. And what did Rabbi Shimon do in that cave? He went deeper. When everything external is stripped away, when every distraction the world offers is removed, when there is nowhere to go and nothing to pursue except God, something happens to a person. The surface layers burn off, the noise quiets, and in that silence, the hidden structure of reality begins to reveal itself. The tradition attributes to Rabbi Shimon the foundational teachings that would eventually become the Zohar. The name itself tells you everything you need to know. In Hebrew, the word Zohar, spelled Zayin Vav He Resh, means radiance, splendor, the quality of light that does not merely illuminate an object but seems to emanate from inside it. The light that comes before the source becomes visible. This is not a small distinction. Pay attention to this. Most of us live our lives in reflected light. We see the world by what bounces back to us from surfaces we can measure and touch. We understand God, if we understand God at all, by the effects that can be observed. The prayer that was answered, the coincidence that seemed too precise, the healing that the doctors couldn't fully explain. We know God by the edges, by the shadows that divine presence casts in our ordinary world. The Zohar is not about the shadows. The Zohar is about the source, the central teaching of Kabbalistic thought, the spine on which the entire Zohar rests, is the concept of the Ein Sof. In Hebrew, Ein means without, and Sof means end. Ein Sof, without end, the infinite, the name given to the nature of God that precedes all description, all limitation, all categories that the human mind can hold. Not God as a king, not God as a judge, not God as a lawgiver, God as the infinite ground of all being, the endless light from which everything that exists flows in an unbroken stream. And here is the teaching that will rearrange something inside you if you let it land. The Zohar says that you are not separate from that light. You were never separate. The tradition speaks of the divine spark, the neshama, the soul, which is not a human creation but a fragment of the infinite light itself, placed inside this temporary vessel of flesh and bone. The body is borrowed. The name is temporary. But the soul, the Zohar teaches, carries within it an imprint of the divine radiance that existed before the world was made. Before matter, before time, before the first word of Genesis was spoken into the void. This is why you feel that hollow ache when your spiritual life stays only on the surface. Because your surface self, the self that has a job and a history and a set of fears and a list of failures, that self is real, but it is not the deepest real. The deepest real is the light. And the light, the Zohar teaches, is never absent, never withheld, never punishing you with silence. The light is always radiating, always available, always pressing outward. What changes is our capacity to receive it. Now, I want to ask you a harder question, because we have been speaking of light, and that is a beautiful word. And beautiful words can become a kind of anesthesia if we're not careful. They can make us feel we've received something without actually changing anything. So let me name the actual problem. You are walking around with a receiving apparatus that is partially blocked. That's the honest teaching of the Zohar. Not that God is holding back, not that you are unworthy, not that you need to earn your way into divine presence through enough good behavior or enough suffering or enough years of sitting quietly in a building with stained glass windows. The receiving apparatus is blocked. And the Zohar, which is fundamentally a practical book disguised as a mystical one, spends enormous energy describing what blocks the light and what opens it again. The word the tradition uses for the process of opening, of restoring, of repairing what has been broken, is tikkun, from the Hebrew root meaning to fix, to correct, to restore to wholeness. The Zohar teaches that the universe itself is in a state of tikkun, a great ongoing process of repair, and that every human soul participates in that repair, whether they know it or not. Every act of genuine kindness, every moment of authentic prayer, every time you choose light over darkness in some small and private interior moment that no one else will ever see, you are participating in the repair of the cosmos. This changes the meaning of your life. Your life is not a random interval between birth and death, not a brief interruption of meaninglessness. Your life is a repair mission. Your specific wounds, your specific history, your specific location in time and space is not accidental. You were placed precisely here, in this moment, with this particular broken heart and this particular untapped capacity, because there is a fragment of the divine light that only you can restore. Only your hands, only your choices, only the specific quality of your presence in the world. No one else can do your portion. Read that again. No one else can do your portion. Now I need to tell you about the 15 centuries of concealment, because this is where the story becomes not just beautiful but urgent. The tradition associated with Rabbi Shimon's cave teachings was not immediately published to the world. It was precious. It was powerful. And there is a principle in the Kabbalistic tradition that knowledge of this depth, knowledge of the inner structure of reality, must be received by a vessel prepared to hold it. To hand the deepest spiritual truth to a person not yet ready to receive it is not kindness. It can be harm. The same fire that warms the prepared heart can scorch the unprepared one. So the teachings were guarded, passed in chains of transmission from master to student, from the 2nd century through the long centuries of exile and dispersal, through the destruction and rebuilding and destruction again that defined Jewish history in those long dark years. The external history of the Jewish people in that period is largely a history of loss. The temple gone, the homeland gone, communities scattered from Spain to Poland to North Africa, surviving by clinging to the text, to the prayer, to the identity that even armies could not fully extinguish. And through all of it, underground, invisible to most eyes, the inner teachings flowed. Then, in the late 13th century, in Spain, a scholar named Rabbi Moshe de Leon began to distribute texts, page, then manuscripts, then a growing body of material written in an ancient, layered Aramaic, presenting itself as a record of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's discourses in the cave and in the years after. The rabbis and scholars of the time debated, argued, questioned, some accepting these texts as the authentic ancient transmission, others disputing their origins. That scholarly debate has never fully resolved, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. What I will tell you is this: the Zohar, however one navigates the question of its historical origins, contains teachings of a spiritual depth that have transformed lives across 7 centuries since it emerged. Scholars as rigorous as Gershom Scholem, who spent his entire career on this question, acknowledge the text's extraordinary power regardless of the unresolved questions about its authorship. What matters more than the archival question is this: the teaching inside the Zohar was not supposed to be widely available. For most of Jewish history, there were gatekeepers. The tradition held that one should be a certain age, of a certain level of observance, of a certain preparation of character before approaching the inner chambers of the Zohar. Not because ordinary people were unworthy, but because the house that has never been swept is a different kind of house than the one that has been swept 1,000 times. And some rooms need a cleaner floor. But we are in a different moment. Listen to me carefully. We are in a moment in human history when the gatekeeping structures have mostly dissolved, when anyone with a phone and a connection can access translations of the Zohar that would have been locked in private libraries a century ago, when teachings that were shared only in small rooms among advanced students are now being broadcast across digital networks to millions. And there is a school of thought, not a fringe school, but a serious one, rooted in Kabbalistic understanding of history, that says this is not a catastrophe. This is by design. That the opening of this knowledge to the wider world is itself part of the tikkun. That the moment we are living in, however chaotic it appears from the surface, is a moment of acceleration. A moment in which the light is being distributed more widely than ever before, specifically because the need is greater than ever before. You didn't stumble onto this video. There is no stumbling in a world governed by a divine intelligence that knows what every soul needs. You were directed here. Now I want to give you something practical. Because the Zohar, for all its mystical grandeur, is ultimately a book about how to live, and what it teaches about how to live can be distilled into 3 movements that anyone can practice. Regardless of your religious tradition, regardless of your level of prior study, regardless of how dry or blocked or distant from God you currently feel, the first movement is this: learn to distinguish between the garment and the wearer. The Zohar contains one of the most luminous passages in all of spiritual literature on this subject. It uses the metaphor of the Torah itself. But the teaching extends far beyond the Torah. It says that the uninitiated person looks at the surface of the sacred text and takes the story for the whole truth. The wise person looks at the story and asks, "What is the story pointing toward?" But the genuinely illuminated person looks past the story, past the teaching that lies beneath the story, all the way to the soul of the text, the living divine light that the words are trying to clothe. Now take that exact framework and apply it to your own life. The events of your life, the circumstances you were born into, the wounds you carry, the relationships you've built and lost, the failures and the recoveries, these are garments. They are real. They matter. Do not dismiss them, but they are not the final truth about you. Underneath those garments is a teaching, and underneath the teaching is a living light that is your actual essence. Most people spend their entire lives operating at the garment level. They define themselves by what has happened to them, by what they have accumulated or lost, by what other people think of them or have done to them, and their spiritual practice, if they have one, is largely a negotiation with the garment. Please change this garment. Please remove that one. Please give me a better one. The Zohar invites you to do something more radical, to stop negotiating with the garment and to begin asking what is wearing it. Who is wearing this life? What is the nature of the one who has been inside this body, experiencing all of this for all of these years? Sit with that question, not the anxious version of it, not the philosophical puzzle version of it, but the still, honest, curious version of it. Ask it in the early morning before the day's noise begins. Ask it in the moment between waking and full consciousness, when the mind is still soft and the defenses have not yet assembled themselves. Who is wearing this life? The answer will not come in words. Usually, it comes in a quality of stillness, a sense of spaciousness, a brief, unmistakable recognition that there is something here, something that has always been here, something that cannot be hurt or depleted or diminished, no matter what the garment has been through. That is the light. That is the Zohar speaking. But I want to give you something even more specific, because the first movement, learning to distinguish between garment and wearer, can remain abstract if you are not careful. Abstraction is the comfortable resting place of the person who wants to feel spiritual without actually changing anything. So let me make it concrete. Tonight, before you sleep, take the single most difficult circumstance in your life right now, the one you least want to think about, the one that feels most stuck, most hopeless, most defined, and instead of reviewing the story of it, instead of rehearsing the pain or the anger or the grief for the 1,000th time, ask a different question. Ask, what is this circumstance a garment for? What teaching? What growth? What opening is being clothed in this difficulty? Not because suffering is always a lesson. Sometimes suffering is just suffering. And the Zohar does not insult genuine pain by reducing it to a curriculum. But because the habitual experience of pain, the suffering we have been carrying for years without movement, is almost always a sign that we have gotten stuck at the level of the garment and cannot see past it to what it is pointing toward. You do not have to understand the answer immediately. You do not have to arrive at peace or acceptance in one sitting. You only have to hold the question honestly. Sometimes the simple act of asking shifts the angle by 1 degree, and 1 degree, held consistently over weeks and months, becomes a completely different direction. The second movement is this: treat every human being you encounter as a lamp. The Zohar's understanding of the soul is not individualistic in the way the modern Western mind tends to understand the self. It does not teach that each person is an isolated spark, disconnected from every other spark, competing for limited divine attention. The Sephirot, the 10 divine attributes through which the infinite light flows into the world, are not 10 separate pipelines. They are 10 facets of one light. And the human souls that carry fragments of that light are not separated from one another in the way that solid objects are separated. Every person you have ever met carries a fragment of the divine radiance. The colleague who irritates you, the family member who has caused you pain, the stranger on the bus, the person whose politics enrage you, the one who, if you are being completely honest with yourself, you have quietly written off. Every single one of them is carrying a lamp. The lamp may be dimmed by their history, smoked with suffering, clouded by their own unhealed fractures. But the light inside the lamp is the same light that is inside yours. When the Zohar speaks about connecting to other people with genuine compassion, it is not asking you to be sentimental. It is not asking you to pretend that harm is not harm or that difficult people are not difficult. It is asking you to develop the capacity to look through the garment, through the outer presentation of a person, all the way to the lamp they are carrying without knowing it, and to respond, even briefly, even imperfectly, to the lamp rather than the garment. This is not easy. It is, in fact, one of the most demanding spiritual practices I know of, because it requires you to see with different eyes than the ones the world has trained you to use. The world has trained you to assess, judge, categorize, protect yourself. The Zohar trains you to see through. There is a term in the mystical tradition, ayin tova, a good eye, not just a kind glance, but a fundamentally different mode of perception. The person with a good eye does not see a world full of threats and competitors. They see a world full of hidden lamps, most of them dimmed, all of them carrying the same divine origin, all of them in need of the same thing, recognition. When you offer genuine recognition to another person, not flattery, not manipulation, but the simple, honest acknowledgement that you see the lamp they are carrying, something happens. Not just to them, to you, because the act of seeing the light in another person restores your ability to see it in yourself. Every time you look at someone else through the eyes of the Zohar, you are tuning your own receiving apparatus. You are clearing the blockage. You are participating in the tikkun. You are repairing the world, one recognition at a time. The third movement is the one that will feel the strangest, and the one that I believe is the most urgently needed in the world we are living in. Practice living inside the question. The greatest enemy of spiritual depth in the modern world is not atheism. It is certainty. I have met atheists whose skepticism was genuinely humble, genuinely searching, genuinely open to surprise. I have met deeply religious people whose religion was, in truth, a fortress they had built to avoid the terrifying openness of not knowing, and I have met the reverse of both. But the pattern I encounter most often in people who feel spiritually stuck, people who feel like they are pressing their hands against glass, is this. They have confused having answers with being close to God. And I want to push this further, because I think it deserves more than a passing acknowledgement. The world trains you from childhood to privilege the closed answer over the open question. The correct answer earns the gold star. The question is a sign of deficiency, of not yet having arrived. We sit in schools and in services and in seminars and we receive information and we are measured by how well we retain it. And slowly, without anyone intending to teach us this, we begin to experience knowledge as something that fills up a container rather than something that perpetually blows the container open. The Zohar operates by exactly the opposite principle. Every answer it offers is a door into a larger space. Every explanation generates 10 new territories of not knowing. Every time you think you have caught the teaching in your hands, you open your hands and find it has expanded beyond what you can hold. This is not a failure of the text. This is the text functioning perfectly. Because the God it points toward is the Ein Sof, without end, and a text that actually orients you toward the infinite must itself be, in some sense, inexhaustible. I have colleagues who have spent 40 years with a single passage of the Zohar and still report finding something they have not seen before. That is not hyperbole. That is what a living text does. That is what it means for a spiritual work to carry the divine light within its structure, rather than merely to describe it from the outside. The Zohar does not offer a closed system. It offers an opening. Ein Sof means without end. That is not only a description of God, it is a description of the spiritual path. There is no arrival point. There is no moment when you have understood enough, accumulated enough insight, performed enough practice to be done. The mystical tradition does not promise a destination. It promises a direction, and the direction is always inward, always deeper, always toward the next layer that has not yet been touched. This is why the Zohar has been studied continuously for centuries without being exhausted. Not because it is clever, because it is alive, because the teaching inside it is not a fixed object to be acquired, but a living presence to be entered. And every time you enter with genuine hunger, you encounter something you have never encountered before. Even if you have read the same passage 100 times, the rabbis teach that the Torah has 70 faces, 70 doors, each one opening into a different angle of the divine light. The Zohar opens doors within those doors. It is a text that assumes the universe is inexhaustible, because the God it points toward is inexhaustible. And it invites you into a mode of life that operates by the same principle. What would change in your daily experience if you woke up every morning and held the question rather than the answer? If instead of reviewing the conclusions you have already reached about your life, you genuinely asked, "What have I not yet seen? What is this moment offering that I have not yet opened?" Not as a practice of anxiety, not as a refusal to be grounded, but as a posture of genuine readiness, of receptivity, of the open-handed stance that allows something new to be placed in the hands. The Zohar calls this quality chokmah, wisdom, and one of the most startling things the Zohar teaches about chokmah is that it is not acquired through accumulation, it is accessed through emptying. The Hebrew word chokhmah can be read, in the mystical interpretive tradition, as two words, koach and ma, power, and what? The power of what? The power of not knowing, the power of the honest question. You cannot pour water into a full vessel, and you cannot receive new light through a mind that has decided it already knows the shape of God. Now, I want to speak to you directly, not as a teacher, not from the distance of scholarship, directly to wherever you are sitting right now. Someone watching this right now has been carrying a spiritual wound for so long that you've started to mistake it for your personality. You've told yourself the story of your disconnection from God so many times that you've stopped hearing it as a story and started treating it as a fact. It happened years ago, maybe something you prayed for that didn't come, maybe a loss that shook the foundation of everything you believed. Maybe a community that failed you, a leader who disappointed you, an institution that showed you its ugliness and left you with nowhere to put your faith. And you are here. You are watching this video at whatever hour it is in your world. And some part of you, the persistent part, the part that will not fully give up on the possibility that there is something more to find, directed you here. I want to tell you something about that part. That part is not a remnant of naivety. It is not wishful thinking or psychological need dressed up as spirituality. That persistent hunger, the one that survived everything that tried to extinguish it, is the neshama. It is the divine spark in you that knows what it came from and has not stopped looking for the way back. It cannot be extinguished. It can be buried. It can be ignored. It can be covered over with so many layers of disappointment and cynicism and the sheer exhausted pragmatism of adult life that it becomes nearly inaudible. But it cannot be destroyed, because it was not made of the stuff that can be destroyed. The Zohar was hidden for 15 centuries, and when it finally came to light, it was still alive. Everything in it was still burning. The cave could not kill it. The centuries could not kill it. The controversy around its origins could not kill it. The teaching was imperishable because the light it pointed toward is imperishable. And the light in you is exactly the same. There is no divine light that is perishable. There is no soul that is too broken to be restored. There is no distance from God that cannot be crossed when the direction changes. You just have to change the direction, not completely, not all at once, not in some dramatic gesture that you cannot sustain. The Kabbalistic tradition has never been impressed by dramatic gestures. It has been sustained by small, consistent, intentional movements, by the person who lights the same candle at the same hour every week, by the person who returns to the text not because they are moved by it in that moment, but because they made a commitment to return. And returning matters more than feeling. By the person who chooses, in the ordinary, uncelebrated interior of a Tuesday morning, to see the lamp in the person sitting across the table from them. Small, consistent, intentional. Those three words are the practical heart of the Zohar's instruction for how a human being actually changes. Not through the single catastrophic awakening, though those happen too and are extraordinary when they do. Through the daily decision to move one small degree toward the light, to choose the question over the closed answer, to see through the garment for one additional moment before the familiar judgments reassemble, to hold the receiving apparatus open for 30 more seconds than yesterday. The rabbis of the mystical tradition speak of going from level to level, from chamber to chamber, not leaping, moving. The Hebrew word for it is aliyah, which we usually translate as ascent. But it also carries the sense of approach, a gradual approach, a step taken toward, and then another, and then another. Every step counts. Every step is recorded in a realm your ordinary consciousness cannot access. Every step toward the light changes the configuration of the light available to everyone else. Because this is not a private journey. I know we speak of the individual soul, the individual receiving apparatus, the individual spiritual work, but the Zohar is absolutely clear that no soul is an island. The repair of one soul reverberates through the system of all souls. The world is a single, unified structure of interconnected light. And when you clear even one small channel, the light flows more freely through channels you will never see or know. Your spiritual work matters more than you will ever know in this lifetime. I want to say that one more time in a different way, because it is not a platitude, and I do not want you to receive it as one. In the Kabbalistic understanding of reality, The physical world is the outermost shell of a nested structure of worlds. The inner worlds are more fundamental than this one, and the actions taken in this world, small actions, invisible actions, the interior movements of a single soul choosing differently in an unwitnessed moment. To these, ripple upward and inward through all the layers. You cannot see the effect. You will almost certainly never know the full reach of a single genuine moment of spiritual opening on your part. But the teaching is firm, and it is not sentimental. Every movement toward the light amplifies the light available to the entire structure. You are not working alone. You have never been working alone. The Zohar was hidden because the world was not yet ready. The vessel was not yet strong enough to hold the intensity of what it contained. And then a moment came when the hiding was no longer the service. When the greater service was to open the seal and let the teaching pour out. We are in one of those moments right now. Not just regarding the Zohar, regarding everything that has been buried, every teaching that was locked away because the time was not yet right, every piece of your own inner life that went underground because the environment could not hold it, because you could not hold it, because the pain was too great or the world was too loud or no one ever taught you that what was buried in you was treasure and not garbage. The time for concealment is ending. This is not wishful thinking. This is the reading of the historical and spiritual moment that I have been sitting with for years, and that many teachers and scholars, far more learned than I am, have articulated with greater precision. The light is pressing outward. The question is whether you will press back against it, as most people do, because the familiar darkness is at least known, at least predictable, at least not requiring anything new of you, or whether you will begin, in the small and unglamorous and daily way the mystical tradition has always commended, to open, to ask the question, what have I not yet seen? To look through the garment at the person across from you and ask, what lamp is this? To wake in the morning and hold the stillness long enough to ask, who is wearing this life? These are 3 doors. Any one of them, entered honestly, will take you somewhere you have not been before. And wherever it takes you, you will find the same thing waiting for you there. The same thing that has been waiting for you in every place you have ever genuinely looked. Not an answer, not a reward, not a supernatural experience you can post about or sell or use as proof of something. You will find the light, not reflected, not borrowed, not secondhand, the light that is the ground of everything, the Ein Sof pressing against the inner walls of your own awareness, waiting for you to finally, with whatever combination of courage and desperation and grace got you to this moment, say yes. Say yes to the opening. Say yes to not knowing. Say yes to the repair. The Zohar was not written for scholars. It was not written for the already initiated, the already advanced, the already perfect in their practice. The tradition records that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai sat in a cave for 13 years with nothing. A carob tree, a spring, his son, the text, and in that absolute stripping away of everything comfortable and familiar and safe, something came through. Something that had always been there, but that required the silence to be fully received. You do not need a cave. You need the equivalent of the cave. 5 minutes in the morning before the phone comes on. 2 minutes in the afternoon where you close the door and hold the question. An evening when you put down the noise and sit with the ache instead of trying to medicate it. Because the ache is not your enemy. The ache is the most reliable signal you have that the soul is alive and looking for its source. Use the ache. Do not numb it. Do not explain it away. Do not rush past it into productivity or entertainment or the endless recursive loop of social media comparison. Sit with the ache and ask it, what are you pointing toward? It is always pointing toward the same thing. It is always pointing toward the light. I want to close with something that I believe with every fiber of my long and complicated and sometimes mistaken life. I believe that you are not an accident. I believe that the specific configuration of your history and your wounds and your longings and your capacities was not assembled randomly. I believe that there is a fragment of the divine light that exists in the world because you exist in it. A fragment that would be missing if you were missing. A repair that would be undone if you left it undone. The Zohar was hidden for 15 centuries, and it survived. Everything the darkness attempted against the light failed. All of it. The persecutions, the burnings, the enforced silences, the long centuries of exile. The light was never extinguished. It was never even diminished. It waited, held in trust, moving through quiet hands in quiet rooms, until the moment came when the wider world was ready to receive it. Your light has been doing the same thing. It has been surviving everything you have thrown at it, everything that has been thrown at you, every year of distance and doubt and dryness, and the particular loneliness of feeling spiritually alone in a crowded world. The light waited. It did not diminish. It kept the small flame going in the room you had almost forgotten was there. You are in that room right now. The door is open. Come in. Before you go, I want you to do one final thing. Scroll down to the comments right now and type those 3 words again. Open my eyes. Type it for yourself. Type it as a declaration that you are not content to live only on the surface any longer. Type it as a covenant with the part of you that has not given up, that sent you to this video today, that is already leaning toward the light. And subscribe to this channel, because we have only begun. There are layers upon layers in this teaching, and I intend to spend the time we have together going deeper into every one of them. The Sephirot, the nature of the soul, the practice of tikkun in daily life, the relationship between prayer and divine light, the teaching of the 4 levels of Scripture, the understanding of exile and redemption that the Zohar offers and that has never been more relevant to the world we are living in than right now. We are just beginning. May your eyes be open to the light that has always been waiting inside the room you thought was empty. May the ache in you become a compass instead of a wound. May the questions you carry lead you further inward than you have yet been. May you find, in the small and ordinary moments of your beautiful and unrepeatable life, the radiance that no darkness has ever managed to extinguish. Go now. Go slowly. Go with your eyes more open than when you arrived here. The light is already in you. It has always been in you. All you are doing is remembering